Why don't we get started from Parliament, where the House has struggled to get MPs on the floor as majority boycott sitting for the third time. Parliamentary Affairs correspondent Gyakye Asante joins us with the details. Right, Gyakye, talk to us. Has sitting started? What's the attendance looking like in the House today?
So sitting has since adjourned. Parliament started sitting around 12, and there were not so many MPs on the floor. In fact, we know that the NDC minority MPs have boycotted sitting because of Gyakye Quayson. So they were not in the chamber at all. But at the time sitting started, the first deputy speaker, this is came in to meet. There's about 25 NDC MPs, and that was the number that they had to adjust and do some sort of work with. It was not so encouraging, but they had to go ahead nevertheless. And so sitting has now adjourned to tomorrow because the minority boycotted, but the government side were able to do a few business before the House took an agenda.
Right. Okay. So what exactly are some of the items lined up for the attention of Parliament today?
Well, so in particular, the House has to do with the buffer stock company. They are owing some suppliers to the tune of about 270 million in the whole of last week. The suppliers ticketed as the buffer stock company limited. They had an assurance from the Agri Minister that the money was going to be paid. The money since has not been paid. The minority visited them. They raised issues on the floor and had the Speaker of Parliament direct the Agri Minister brief MPs. And so the Agri Minister was on the floor today to brief MPs on the state of that debt. He says that government has paid 50% of that debt, and that it's expected that the money will hit the account of these suppliers by the end of tomorrow, midweek. That is the assurance that the Agri Minister is giving. So that was one particular key business that the House has to do with. There were also a number of questions that stood in the name of NDC MP and one in the name of an NDC MP. That question that stood in the name of the NDC MP was asked, but the ones having to do with the NDC MP could not be asked because the NDC MPs are boycotting the House. And because of that, the questions have now been deemed to have been forfeited. The answers will not be published. But the House could not deal with much weightier business. For instance, matters having to do with bills that are currently before the House. We've already spoken about the death penalty, something that has come up strongly on the floor of the House. But they could not deal with it today because the MPs are simply not around to be able to deal with that. So a few business on the cross have not been dealt with, but the House has now had to take an adjournment to come in tomorrow.
This series of absences by the minority have been in solidarity with Gyakye Quayson, who returns to court once more today. Tell us, how come on previous occasions these boycotts caused the House to suspend sitting, but not today?
Well, yes. The last three times that it happened, Parliament adjourned almost immediately. They did not deal with almost any business at all. But this time around, the majority have been insistent that the government of Ghana and the Parliament of Ghana actually cannot wait for the minority, and that if they continue to boycott, the majority will try and bring their numbers on the floor to do business. Today, the numbers were not that encouraging because 25 is a pale shadow of the actual numbers on the majority side. But they were able to do some small business regardless. That meant that the House did not adjourn immediately. They were able to take a few business, lay a few papers here and there, take some questions before the House took an adjournment, unlike the previous situation when the House almost adjourned immediately when the House started because the minority were not there. But this sitting today was a little bit different because a few businesses were considered.
Gyakye, thank you for that update. No doubt you'll keep on top of this issue for us. That's our parliamentary correspondent, Gyakye Asante. Now, we've got Joseph Akable joining us now with updates on the case that is causing the boycott in Parliament. Gyakye Quayson returns to court today, and our very own Joseph Akable has been keeping an eye on proceedings. Joseph, how did today unfold as the fate of Gyakye Quayson is decided in court?
Business that was to be dealt with today had to do with a ruling that was to be delivered by the courts. We know that Mr. Quayson has been fighting in the last couple of weeks, raising concerns about the court's decision to hear his case on a day-to-day basis. He initially made a request at the High Court. The High Court said he was going to hold it on a day-to-day basis. He asked the court to review his decision. The court affirmed his decision again. Then he filed an appeal at the Court of Appeal. He again has filed a process at the Supreme Court that effectively wants the case at the High Court to be put on hold. And so he put these matters in front of the High Court and asked the High Court that, in view of the fact that there are pending processes at the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, the case should be put on hold. Now, the Attorney General, Godfrey Yeboah-Dame, disagreed and had told the court that, as far as the laws of Ghana are concerned, unless a higher court gives a lower court an order to halt its proceedings, the lower court was not required to put its proceedings on hold simply because someone has gone to file a process at the higher court. And he made a point that if that were to be allowed, it would mean that all an accused person would have to do is, whenever there is a ruling at the court, he proceeds to file whatever process they want to file at a higher court, and no business will be done. This argument found favor with the court presided over by Justice Mary Yanzu, and in a ruling today, she did indicate that, as far as she is concerned, there had been no evidence showing that there was an order from any court stopping her from proceeding with the case. And so she dismissed the request by Mr. Quayson's legal team to put the case on hold, and then proceeded to have the hearing take place with a witness of the state going into the witness box to be cross-examined.
Well, it would appear that there might be even more boycotts coming up if proceedings continue as they have. So, I mean, at this point, as the prosecution continues to lay out its case, how is it affecting what we heard to be Gyakye Quayson's position from the very beginning of this matter? How much of a dent is the prosecution's case making in their defense so far?
In fact, as far as Mr. Quayson's lawyers are concerned, they say that they believe that the case of the prosecution so far, this is just the first witness, they said it hasn't added anything to the charges against him. They hold a view that the prosecution is failing in its quest to prove the case. Now, the first witness is Richard Techi-Mensah. He's the individual who actually went to the police CID to file a criminal complaint against James Gyakye Quayson. He's the one who went there to say that, look, this individual had filed his nomination forms, and in doing the statutory declaration, he had claimed he did not owe allegiance to any other country aside from Ghana, but it turns out that that's not accurate, and so investigate him for various offenses. And so that's what gave rise to this particular process. Now, he was in the box today. He was cross-examined by Chachu Chikata for a very brief period, but very interesting banter between them. The question Mr. Chikata sought to find out from him was the complaint that he had written at the police CID, whether he wrote it himself in English or someone wrote it and gave it to him to submit, or was it a case that he narrated in Twi and it was now translated and written in English for him? Mr. Mensah told the court that he wrote it himself and he wrote it in English. Mr. Chikata asked him whether he was certain he was the one who wrote it and wrote it in English and signed. He said yes, he did so. And so he was given a copy of that particular criminal complaint and asked to look at the back page where his signature was, and he confirmed that yes, that was his signature and that was the statement he had given to the police. Then he was confronted with another document from the police investigative team's report. Now, in that investigative team report, he was asked to read some few lines from there, and the few sentences he read indicated that the police said the complainant narrated the incident in Twi, and this was written in English for him. And so, as far as Mr. Quayson's legal team are concerned, this was inconsistent with what he had advanced earlier. When Mr. Mensah was confronted with this in court, his response was that he does not remember. It was a long time ago, and it may have been the case that yes, he had narrated it in Twi. So Mr. Quayson's legal team say that this is someone who is clearly not credible as far as they are concerned. In terms of the other matter that has to do with whether in this petition to the police he attached any evidence in support of his claim that James Gyakye Quayson had committed any crime, he said yes, he attached the documents to it, but Mr. Chikata was engaging him on the fact that they do not have records showing that his petition came along with any such documents, especially the statutory declaration that was signed by James Gyakye Quayson when he filed his nomination form. The point was also made about the fact that whether he was aware that the issues that were being raised had previously been canvassed at the Electoral Commission's offices prior to James Gyakye Quayson being cleared to contest the election, and Mr. Quayson managed to, or was given clearance by the EC to contest the polls. He said he was not aware of that, but those are matters that he read of in the public domain. So it was at that point that the cross-examination ended. And so Mr. Quayson's team said that, look, it was a good day for them. He actually described it as a Black Tuesday. Abraham Maliba says it was an embarrassment of the case of the prosecution. But the Attorney General's office disagreed. Deputy AG Alfred Tuayabwa told us that as far as they are concerned, they are going ahead and presenting their case in a very credible manner.
Typically, the complainant, in any such case, tends to be a person who, until this case comes to light, is not usually a well-known person. We've seen that trend with many of such cases. Now, in this case, how much impact does this have on the prosecution's case if, indeed, the defense is able to bring the credibility of the complainant into question? Does it affect the material evidence in any way?
I mean, as far as the lawyers are concerned, then that is how come the bulk of the cross-examination today centered there. I mean, credibility of a witness is crucial in that if the witness is proven on the stand to be an untruthful person, then it brings into question the quality of the evidence that is submitted to the courts. And so that is why they are engaging them further on this. But we are very much at the very initial stages of this particular case, and the offenses on this particular matter border on issues of forgery, issues of making a false declaration, and false travel certificates, and among other things. So those are the offenses that are against him. And so these are matters that could be borne or proved through documentary evidence, because there was some statutory declarations that were done. Is there a passport? Is there a trail of that? And so all those are matters that will be canvassed. But mind you, the position of James Gyakye Quayson's team, as far as this matter started, has not been to the effect that he never said he did not owe allegiance to any country other than Ghana. Their argument has always been that at the time he made those declarations, he did not owe allegiance to any country other than Ghana because he had put in the application. And we know that the Supreme Court has disagreed with that particular position on the matter. And so we do not know how they would put that defense differently, but they would make it a case again. They've said that he pursued or filled those documents in the honest belief that at the time that was an understanding of the legal position. And it's observation that the Supreme Court has brought clarity on the matter. So those are matters that they will be canvassing in one way or the other before court, per what they have told us so far, Kojo.
Did Gyakye Quayson's team have anything to say about the Attorney General's argument that found favor with the judge regarding the motion they had filed in a higher court?
I mean, they make the point that, yes, they are disappointed, but they are going to the Court of Appeal actually tomorrow. And the first aspect of what the Court of Appeal will be confronted with is whether they should put the trial at the High Court on hold and deal with the issues surrounding whether the judge was right to allow for the case to be heard on a day-to-day basis. And so they make the point that, look, we are disappointed, but we got a good day nonetheless because of how the testimony of the witness went. But going forward, we have the option of putting the same arguments before the Court of Appeal. And this time around, it will be before 3 judges. And so maybe if they fail to convince 1 judge at the higher court, they may get 2 or maybe 3 of the judges at the Court of Appeal to agree with them, in which case it will mean that the decision of the 1 judge at the high court may be set aside. And so that is an aspect of this particular matter that they intend to pursue aggressively. And so tomorrow they will be making those arguments at the Court of Appeal. Again, tomorrow, there's the issue of the contempt case that is against Aketi Hammond, the Minister of State responsible for trades and industry. He, you recall, had made some comments about James Gyakye Quayson's case and likened it to that Damusa Kande case that has resulted in he being dragged to the court for contempt in terms of those comments that he made. And so that is also another matter that is supposed to be dealt with tomorrow at the court. So very busy day at the court. The trial will also continue at the High Court tomorrow. And so first, tomorrow morning, Court of Appeal at 9 a.m. Then they'll come over to the High Court at 12 for a resumption of the trial. Then there's the contempt aspect of the case against the Minister of State that has to be also dealt with at the High Court.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive update. Joseph Akable is our court correspondent, and you'll be hearing lots more from him as this and other cases continue to make their way through the justice system. Now, in the last few years, the multimedia group, which owns Joy News, Joy FM, Asempa FM, Love News, and others, has been at the receiving end of attacks, either from politicians, police, or even ordinary members of the public who are themselves beneficiaries of our work. Now, this barbaric act of attacking journalists has been rising in our country, with some even losing their lives as a result. Remember Latif Idris, Emmanuel Ante, Ahmed Swale, may God rest his soul, and Kwesi Parker-Wilson. The list continues. And to make matters worse, those who attack us are the same people who, in most cases, have to investigate the attacks. And you know how that is going to go. This afternoon, the Ghana Journalists Association is taking up the matter and dealing with these cold cases. Their president, Albert Kwabena Jumfo, is holding a news conference at the GJA headquarters. I want us to chip in and hear his thoughts on the matter.
Thank you very much. The president of the GJA, my colleague, national executive members, and my colleague, media practitioners. I want to say good afternoon to each and every one of you, and to add my voice to the apology rendered by Becky. We are starting about 1 hour late, and we are sorry for keeping you waiting. We are also thankful that you've had patience to wait for us, and that is a belief that we are all concerned about the matters we are going to address this afternoon. And the matters are very straightforward. It's about attacks on media practitioners in recent times. We have observed quite a number of them, and we are worried about what is happening now, especially when we are gearing up for an election year which promises to be very keen. And so when you are experiencing such attacks, they give cause to worry. There are a number of them we are going to address this afternoon, and the president of the GJA will be leading us in that on that course. One coming from the upper East region, but involving a colleague who is based in the Upper West region. One coming from the Ashanti region, and one coming from Tema. So these three attacks alone, and from where they are coming, clearly indicate that it is across the country. We have some from the northern sector, some from the middle belt, and some from the southern sector. And it is something we need to speak against. You know, the 1992 Constitution has spelled out some beautiful provisions by which any aggrieved person can seek redress. So, for example, under the Constitution, if a media person or media organization publishes something that you are aggrieved about, you may want to exercise your right to rejoinder under Article 162, Clause 6 of the 1992 Constitution. And right to rejoinder is a shall provision. So when you have won, the media organization or the individual who published the article against you has no choice but to publish your side of the story. And it is basically for you to also tell your side of the story. Secondly, the Constitution has also made provisions for the National Media Commission to settle disputes. So if you are aggrieved by any means, you can file a complaint at the NMC, and the NMC will go into that matter, and the issue will be resolved. Thirdly, the same constitution also makes provision for individuals whose reputation is injured to seek legal means, and one of the popular of such means is defamation. So you, the aggrieved person, can sue for defamation, and you may also get your case addressed. And all these avenues are civil means of addressing our issues. There is nowhere in the Constitution that says if by chance I write anything unpalatable about you, you need to come slap me. Okay, and if we were to go that route, then the soldier who is holding the gun will rule all of us. But what rules us is the law. That is why we say we are under the dispensation of the rule of law. So we are very much concerned about these attacks, and the president of the GJ is going to tell us in detail what the nature of the attacks are, and some steps we as a professional organization we have taken, and what we plan to do in the future going forward. And I'm only playing the role of John the Baptist. I'm here to prepare the way for the president of the GJA. So the details of our message for us this afternoon lies in his mouth and not mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kofi Yeboah, the General Secretary of the Ghana Journalists Association, for giving us an insight into what the 1992 Constitution has for us as journalists and as citizens of Ghana, the provisions that we have and the routes that we need to take instead of anarchy, the rule of law. That's why we are living a democracy. And so that's the word out there. And very soon, the president will be addressing us on the issues going forward. Let me point out that today's press conference is being carried live on the Joy News channel. The Joy News channel is live with this press conference. Thank you very much, Joy News, for this. Let me go ahead and welcome to the podium the president of the Ghana Journalists Association, Mr. Albert Jumfo, to tell us what is happening on the media landscape so far as the attacks on journalists in Ghana is concerned. Mr. Albert Jumfo. A round of applause for him, please. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of our noble profession. Let me add my voice to that of my able General Secretary and Public Affairs Officer who doubles as the MC for today's press conference. That we sincerely apologize for the late start, and we hope and promise that this would happen again. Now let's move straight to why we are here this afternoon. You are welcome to this important press conference that is very dear to the GJ, because this borders on the survival and sanctity of our profession, and therefore as practitioners you must be equally worried. The immediate trigger to this press conference is the incessant attacks on journalists in the country in recent times. As you may all be aware, the attacks on journalists have become so rampant that the GJ cannot silent on them, as our colleagues continue to suffer such inhumane treatments. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, one of the cases that is fresh in the memory is the attack on the Upper West Regional Chairman of GJ, Swala Abdul Wahab. The circumstances under which an immigration officer and a senior immigration officer for that matter pointed a gun at him and threatened to shoot him on June 20th, 2023, without any provocation certainly required urgent investigation and appropriate sanctions where necessary. Swala, who is also the Upper East Regional Correspondent of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, was traveling from Wa to Bolga on a public transport to attend a workshop on climate change. The vehicle stopped at the immigration checkpoint at Naro in the Nandoli Kalio district for routine check of Ghana cards of all passengers. The passengers, including Swala, disembarked from the vehicle. He then requested to use a kettle, which in our local language called buta, belonging to the immigration officers to perform ablution in a makeshift roofing sheet structure believed to be a urinal. But the immigration officers declined his request, so he returned the kettle, that's the buta, and decided to go into the bush to urinate. On his way, one of the officers instructed him to cross to the other side of the road to urinate. Swala did not find any justification in risking his life to cross a highway just to urinate when it was safe to do so in the bush on the side of the road where he was. The immigration officer, out of anger, shouted, "I am asking you to cross the road to urinate, and you are challenging me." He then cocked his gun and threatened, "If you are a man, go and urinate." Swala, together with the other passengers, quickly moved away from the scene and further into the bush to urinate. When Swala returned, the immigration officer again threatened to blow off his head for challenging him. In the course of the event, another immigration officer, whose name tag is given as Enim Ajepong, who was wearing the rank of Assistant Superintendent of Immigration, ASI, and believed to be the senior-most officer among them, suddenly rushed over and threatened to arrest and lock up Swala. Subsequently, he rushed into his office and returned with a sidearm pistol, threatening to shoot.
Right, if you're still with us, we are bringing you live images from a press conference being held by the Ghana Journalists Association. They are addressing the growing menace of attacks on journalists, often by those whose work benefits the most. And so we are hearing a catalogue of events that have recently occurred in this light. He is sharing the details, the president of the GJA is sharing the details of these recent events and declaring the stance of the Ghana Journalists Association going forward on such attacks. As you are aware, Multimedia Group has had several of its staff victimized by those who attack journalists. We will be returning to this live press conference after a few messages from our partners. Don't go anywhere.